bring your soul to life. Selected individuals. They could control the version of you that they preferred. The version of you who never refused was the one they adored. However, that version is no longer available, as well as the new you. They're not prepared for this, I see. People, let's be honest. In a great clothing, pleasing is nothing more than emotional enslavement. You grin, you shrink, you bend, and you're screaming within. For what purpose? To maintain connections that didn't exist since you didn't defend yourself. This is a fact. Chronic people-pleasing has been linked in studies to elevated levels of stress, anxiety, and even physical sickness. Yes, exactly. It's not simply irritating when you say yes, when you truly mean no. In fact, it's ruining your health. But you know what? Now that's over it. The old you would spin yourself into a pretzel and over-explain your existence in an attempt to maintain harmony. However, the new you is unapologetic, unbothered, and inaccessible. Let's also be truthful. Isn't it pleasant? We're delving deeply into this transition today because, in reality, confidence isn't the only factor here. It's about taking back your authority, and let them if it means that some people will start accusing you of being selfish. You've played little long enough. Now get your popcorn, because everything is going to change because of this new mentality. First of all, you quit interpreting for the blind. You used to make a special effort to explain yourself to others. You made sure no one ever felt uncomfortable around you, softened your comments, and gave numerous explanations. If somebody questioned your decisions, you would quickly clarify your intentions if they were misinterpreted. You stand up for them. You squandered years attempting to communicate your essence to those who were never interested. However, something has changed. You no longer believe that everyone must understand you. It's their fault if they don't understand you. It's their fault if they misrepresent what you said. You no longer have the stamina to persuade others of your identity. They may or may not see you. Finally, you understood that the majority of them had never wanted to meet you in the first place. In actuality, there are many who live on confining you. They like the version of you that was in need of approval and would go out of your way to show your goodness. They went into a frenzy as soon as you finished describing yourself. They lost control, not because they didn't comprehend. Let's also be truthful. When you tried to make amends with folks who didn't care in the first place, how many times did you exhaust yourself? What was the number of talks you mentally relived? Considering that they just never regarded you in the first place, are you wondering whether you said anything incorrectly? Your silence now speaks volumes. You allow someone to misinterpret you if they so desire. You don't correct them if they think the worst of you. You've come to the realization that no matter how much you explain, people will still see you through the prism of their own fears. You've stopped, then. You no longer divide yourself into manageable chunks for others who were never intended to use your energy in the first place. It's their loss if they can't see you well now. You've already invested enough effort in providing blind people with your translations. You just exist now, and that is more than sufficient. Second place, you start to be self-centered, which was always the point. You had no bounds, which is what people meant when they called you unselfish. You donated till all was gone. You put yourself last. You were a decent person because you believed it. Nobody even acknowledged or valued the sacrifices you made. For what purpose? A gratification, a fleeting feeling of inclusion, the delusion of affection. You've woken up now, and they began accusing you of being selfish the instant you stopped going above and beyond for those who just stole from you. Here's the reality, however. The only version of you they ever liked was the one they could exploit. The instant you made your own decision, all of a sudden, you became the issue. Let's be honest, however, the issue was never you. You were too open to understanding, which was the issue. Too ready to sacrifice oneself for those who wouldn't do a single thing for you. The worst part, too, you assumed that was typical. You believed that feeling worn out and undervalued was a normal part of life. You can now recognize it as manipulation. They conditioned you to think that putting your wants first was incorrect and that doing so made you a horrible person. However, that was untrue. And those who drained you were the only ones who profited from that falsehood. You have stopped playing that game. You now understand that those who really care about you want you to look for yourself. The only people who are offended by your limits are those who stand to gain from your lack of them. Let them speak, then. Let them claim that you've evolved. Let people accuse you of being self-centered. It's okay to lose folks in order to keep the peace. In actuality, ceasing to compromise yourself for the sake of others' comfort is the most powerful thing you have ever done. There's no turning back now that you've begun making your own decisions. Thirdly, you have perfected the art of unrepentant quiet. Your quiet used to be a sign of dread. To protect the peace, you remained silent. To avoid confrontation, you suppressed your feelings. You were silent because you were terrified of what would happen if you spoke out, not because you had nothing to say. You believed that being silent was a sign of weakness or capitulation. Your silence now, however, is power. Fear is no longer the source. Control is the source of it. If someone is determined to misunderstand you, you don't spend your time trying to explain yourself. When someone has already determined their version of the truth, you don't dispute with them. You don't plead with others to value, love, or respect you. They can tell all they need to know by your silence. This new you is unfamiliar to some people. They are waiting for you to lose it, to go back and over-explain yourself, to defend your identity. However, you no longer provide them with that gratification because you've come to the realization that you become unpredictable as soon as you stop talking. For those who thrive on control, people are a threat. Some people only pay attention after you stop talking, you see. They don't take you seriously until they can no longer use your energy. They have no regard for language. Absence is respected, and that's precisely what you're providing them today. Your silence sets a limit. It conveys the idea that I will not spend time with those who don't respect me. It serves as a reminder that your work is more important than what other people think. You owe no one explanations, second chances, or closure. Not everyone should have access to your energy because it is precious. Let them ponder, then. Allow them to suffer while you are away. Allow them to feel the consequences of your silence. Because you were untouchable the instant you stopped defending yourself. And nobody is more powerful than someone who doesn't feel the need to prove anything anymore. Fourth, you understand that some people only like you when you're easy to manipulate. Once upon a time, you made life simple for others. You were consistently accessible, amiable, and prepared to change your methods in order to maintain connections. You made no noise, didn't protest, and didn't ask many questions. People found you handy as a result. They referred to you as faithful and compassionate. But the reality, the only reason they liked you was because you were simple to manage. Something shifted the instant you began thinking independently, establishing boundaries, and prioritizing yourself. Some folks began to lose their warmth. The people who used to compliment you on your virtues now seemed irritated, aloof, and even bitter. It has nothing to do with anything you did wrong. The reason for this was that you were no longer fulfilling your part in their script. You were never the focus. It has to do with what you offered. They appreciated your unquestioning yes. They appreciated that you went out of your way to make accommodations for them. They appreciated that you were forgiving. Something you excused without taking responsibility. That you put up with something you ought to have avoided. Now, however, now you reconsider. You now doubt everything. You no longer feel guilty when you say no. Additionally, your advancement exposes them, which makes them uneasy. It makes them face the reality that they only treated you well when you were easy to control. They were not seeking a genuine relationship. Control was what they sought. They are unsure of how to handle you now that they lack that authority. Thus, they attempt to blame you. They claim that you have changed, that you are behaving differently, and that you are selfish, but you are now able to see right through it. You are aware that falling in love should never make you less of who you are. Furthermore, someone has never really desired you if they only want you when they can manipulate you. The version of you that suited them was what they want. There is no longer a version of it. They are uneasy because of this. At number 5, you lose your likability. And that's encouraging. At one point, you cared about being liked. You aspired to be a reliable person for everyone. The person who never irritates others. The person with whom you got along well. And it worked for a time. There were people all around you. However, a large number of them failed to support you. What you could do for them was why they were there. Something unusual occurred the instant you stopped going above and beyond for other people. A few began to distance themselves. It felt colder to talk. The invitations ceased to arrive. People who used to behave as if they couldn't function without you suddenly stopped talking. Why? Because they could no longer utilize you the way they desired. When you were a people pleaser, you saw a specific kind of individual was drawn to you. The people who took advantage of your guilt. You have to be liked. Your dread of disappointing other people. They were aware that you would continue to give, sacrifice, and say yes even when you meant no as long as they had the appropriate cards. But they couldn't stand it once you took back control and began prioritizing yourself. You've changed, they say. In reality, however, they are saying that you are no longer easily influenced. When people label you difficult, they're actually saying that you can no longer put up with rudeness. They behave as if you are the issue. However, the true problem is that your development is making them confront their own inadequacies. This is the reality. You're losing the proper people if you're losing them as a result of establishing boundaries, keeping your peace, and ultimately making the decision to put yourself first. Because your strength will never pose a danger to those who really love and respect you. Thus, release them. Let them speak. Allow them to feel uneasy. Because if someone is offended by your progress, they weren't initially supporting you. And it's okay if being unlikable equates to freedom. Sixth, you come to the realization that you were the glue that kept things together for so long. You believed that everything remained together because it was supposed to. You thought that mutual concern was the reason friendships lasted. Love was the foundation of the family, and partnerships lasted because both parties had equal stakes. You realize the reality now, however. The glue was you. All of this was held together by you. And everything began to fall apart the instant you took a step back. Not because you were selfish or incorrect, but rather because they were never capable of standing alone. It was always you that fixed everything. Thus, nobody else needed to. You were the one who checked in, apologized first, solved problems, provided emotional support, and made explanations for other people. Poor conduct. You took in everything of their negativity, disorder, and instability. For what purpose? Out of fear, out of duty, through love. That everything would collapse if you stopped. Then you did quit one day. Perhaps you were weary. Perhaps you awoke. Perhaps you came to the realization that you were keeping things together for individuals who refused to do anything for you. And what took place? Everything you had been holding together began to fall apart. They had never put forth the effort to stand alone, not because you were the issue. You were the only reason some folks were able to function. They depended on your compassion, your tolerance, and your unwillingness to go. However, they had no clue how to keep things floating after you pulled out. They held you responsible. When all you did was cease carrying what was never yours to bear, they pretended that you had wrecked everything. You now observe from a distance as events unfold, and you feel liberated rather than guilty. Because at last you realize that a connection, relationship, or family dynamic that only works when you put in all the effort was never healthy in the first place. Seventh, even you feel as if your energy is alien. You can't quite place it, but something seems different. Even if you live in the same environment and walk the same streets, you are not the same person. You have more energy, but not in a burdensome sense. Rather, it wants room. In the past, you shrank without even recognizing it. To keep people comfortable, you would lower your voice, blend in with the background, and minimize your presence. Now, however, people now sense you when you enter a room before you even say a word. Entering your power is an odd experience. It seems strange at first, almost like you're wearing clothing that don't suit the person you used to be. Small, amiable, and always doubting yourself. Still murmuring misgivings in the back of your mind. It advises you to keep an eye on how others are seeing you to make sure you remain likable. However, you stop listening because you know deep down that this new energy is precisely where you should be. It's not conceit. It's not pride. It's sovereignty. Knowing that you don't have to beg to sit at any table makes you calm, yet unflappable. It's realizing that you were never supposed to show your value. It just is. And they are uneasy about this change. Others will claim that you have changed. Some may claim that they no longer recognize you. In actuality, however, it was you who had never really known yourself. This is the first time you're meeting your best self. Additionally, it seems strange since you were living your life for so long out of fear, survival, and the urge to fit in. However, those times are now past. You're standing erect now, immobile. You know, deep down, it feels right even if it seems strange. You recognize that being kind was a trap at number 8. For years, you believed that you were only a kind person. You believed it to be a part of your identity. Someone who never wanted to offend anybody, who was always willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, and who was readily forgiving. You realize the reality now, however. You weren't kind because that's not who you were. You were taught to be kind, so you were. You were taught from an early age to maintain harmony, to stay out of arguments, and to minimize yourself so that others could feel at ease. You were taught that answering yes made you likable, that being accommodating indicated that you were a nice person, and that being pleasant was excellent. You were taught that putting yourself first was selfish, that saying no was impolite, and that advocating for yourself was confrontational. Nice was a trap. However, as you can see now, kindness was never the issue. It has to do with control. They wanted you to be easy and submissive. Someone who was susceptible to manipulation, guilt, shame, and the need to be seen as valued and good. You cooperated and put up with rudeness. You overlook it. When you ought to have spoken out, you remained silent. You maintained your grin even when things made you feel nauseous. For what purpose? In order to keep them from leaving, people would like you. That version of you is no longer there. You now understand that being pleasant is not the same as being kind. Kindness originates from strength, is forceful, and is deliberate. Kindness. You were only kept weak by the manner you were trained. Your generosity is now selective. You no longer freely offer it to undeserving individuals. You are no longer wasting your time on those who exploit others. Being nice is something you choose to do, not because you fear the consequences of not being. And you were at last free when you stopped being kind only to win others over. In the 9th position, without attempting, you begin to frighten others. You formerly gave a great deal of consideration to what other people thought, felt, and thought of you. You molded yourself to fit their comfort level, expectations, and ideal of you. You also made yourself predictable by doing this. Safe and easy to read. You've stopped explaining, however. You've stopped apologizing excessively. You no longer need approval from others in order to live fully and without effort. Because you no longer need others as much as you once did, you have become intimidating, not because you are hostile or conceited. They are uneasy about it. A person who owes no one anything, who doesn't ask for permission before occupying space, and who doesn't compromise their truth in order to maintain harmony has a profoundly unsettling quality. To feel whole, one does not need approval. Thus, they project. They claim that you've become aloof, and unapproachable. They mutter that something about you has changed, that you're different now. They're correct, too, because the version of you that they used to feel at ease with is no longer there. Here's the problem, however. You have nothing to do with their misery. It is not your responsibility to make them feel large. If they feel threatened by your confidence, uneasy by your boundaries, or uncomfortable by your unwillingness to be dominated, it is not your responsibility to stay little so they may avoid confronting their own anxieties. Unpacking it is their problem, not yours. To be pleasant is not your purpose. Being easy is not why you are here. To be complete is why you are here. And it's okay if it frightens others. 10th place. You acknowledged that manipulation is what love without respect is. You thought love was sufficient for a long time. People expressed their affection for you, and there was supposed to be some significance to it. But gradually, you were aware of a trend. Only when you were nice did they adore you. While you were donating, when you were helpful, the instant you established limits, the instant reciprocity was required, the instant you refused, that affection didn't seem as warm all of a sudden. Since there was never love, that is why. Control was the issue. You don't have to betray yourself to experience true love. It doesn't need you to remain silent, submit, or make repeated sacrifices. However, you never experienced that type of affection from those in your past. They handed you something that was conditional. A brittle kind of love that was only sustained while you followed the rules. You weren't loved by them. They cherished what you were able to achieve for them. You've changed. First, you demand respect. You will no longer tolerate love that lacks honesty, decency, and responsibility. People are disappearing all of a sudden. It's because they can't control you anymore, not because you did anything wrong. They label you changed, greedy, and challenging. In actuality, however, you've only elevated your expectations. You no longer confuse love with attachment. People who say they care about you shouldn't be allowed to treat you badly. You now see that love devoid of respect is only a ploy to keep you bound to individuals who have never really appreciated you. There is no longer a version of you that would bend, compromise, and accept any kind of love, which is why they feel uneasy. 11. Some individuals were never supposed to applaud you. You realize. You believe that everyone around you wanted the best for you for a very long time. When you told them about your dreams, they grinned. When you discussed your objectives, they nodded. They even gave you enough claps to give you the impression that they supported you. However, the momentum has changed now that you're really winning. At first, the feeling of hollowness and congratulations is mild. Their assistance begins to seem compelled. They no longer inquire about your progress. When you are successful, people stop talking. They have all the time in the world while you're struggling. It strikes you at that point. They never intended for you to completely fail. Simply put, they didn't want you to outgrow them. Some people felt at ease with you as long as you remained little, reliant, and unsure. When you were still figuring things out and wanted their help, they loved you even if you were doubting yourself. Now, however, you move differently now. You have self-assurance. You don't request authorization. You don't need approval. They find it unsettling since, in reality, they never really saw you as an equal. Being the one with the answers, the one you looked up to, and the one who discreetly kept you under them was something they enjoyed. However, the dynamic changed when you took charge of your own destiny, and they are unsure of how to respond to it. Now you can see through it. The people who really stand with you, they always have the same vigor. When you succeed, they rejoice. No matter how far you go, they respect you and encourage you when you're having a hard time. However, those who are only acting reveal themselves as soon as you begin to succeed. So let them go. Allow them to confess by remaining silent. Because some people were never supposed to applaud you, and your development was never intended to make everyone feel at ease. Number 12, you discovered that since you were more approachable in the past, certain people preferred you. You were easily accessible for a long time. Even when it hurt, you were always there, empathetic, and prepared to make accommodations. You bore responsibilities that were never yours to bear, missed more warning signs than you wanted to acknowledge, and gave more opportunities than you should have. And since they could exploit that version of you, people adored it. But you've changed since then. You didn't suddenly become aloof, uncivil, or self-centered, but not in the manner they say. You just quit putting up with this bullshit. You stopped reacting to manipulation. You ceased defending those who would not take responsibility for their actions. They're unhappy when they claim you've changed because of this. In reality, they are saying that I can no longer use guilt to get you to do what I want. They mean that you no longer let me take advantage of you when they claim that you're behaving differently. They're really indicating that they miss the easier-to-manage version of you when they claim that they miss the old you. What's the greatest part? Their annoyance is evidence that you're doing something correctly. Because those who profited from your lack of limits are the only ones who get upset when you establish them. Those who profited from your weakness are the only ones who criticize your progress. They are attempting to instill guilt in you. They claim that you are becoming cruel and that your level of concern has decreased. But you know the truth in your heart. Being a doormat is not the same as being kind. Self-respect does not equate to cruelty. It's not a sign of heartlessness to put yourself first. Allow them to feel uneasy. Their anguish is not your duty to bear, so let them suffer with the realization that they can no longer utilize you. They need to learn from it. Number 13. You have lost interest in protecting those who are incapable of saving themselves. You used to think that if you simply gave more of yourself to others, love could make everything better. More tolerance, more compassion, more selflessness. They would be different. You could see their potential. You noticed their potential. And you persuaded yourself that they would eventually transform into the person they were destined to be if you waited and persevered long enough. Now, however, you may now glimpse the reality. Not everyone wants to become better. Some individuals have no desire to develop. They have no desire to improve. All they want is to feel at ease. And they never had to confront themselves as long as you were there. As long as you were their rescuer, their excuse, or their emotional support system. Here's what you eventually comprehend, however. Someone who refuses to rescue oneself cannot be saved. Love is something you can give, but you can't make people accept it. They must be willing to step through the door even if you show them it. Most significantly, you now understand that fixing them was never your responsibility in the first place. You once believed that your love might save them from their own demise. However, it isn't how love works. The purpose of love is not to save lives. To show you care, love shouldn't have to break you, empty you, or cause you to suffer. You've taken a step back, then. The burden that was never yours to bear has been released. It should come as no surprise that they blamed you the instant you stopped attempting to help them. They accused you of being cold, selfish, and unfaithful. In reality, however, they are arguing that I intended you to suffer in order to avoid having to change. And if setting yourself on fire is not your life's mission, you no longer choose to do it. Just to keep people warm. 14. You've experienced freedom for the first time. It's also addicting. In your life, for the first time. It's enticing, not in a careless manner, but in a way that makes it impossible for me to go back because you now recognize the game for what it was. You refuse to comply with the deception that passes for love, the guilt trips that pass for devotion, and the weariness that passes for being a decent person. It's referred to as arrogance. You're too much now, they say, but that's because they were at ease with the previous you, the one that over-explained every limit, apologized for being there, and gave without expecting anything in return. However, you no longer owe them that version of yourself. The diluted version of yourself is not something you owe others. This is not conceit. Rebellion is not what this is. This is freedom. You're never going back after you've tasted it. The previous version of yourself was a masterpiece created by the expectations of others. However, this is a new you. You made this yourself. Unrepentant, unflappable, and totally within your control. The burden of responsibility, guilt, and false allegiance has been lifted by you. And something uncommon remains. Someone who is very free. You no longer bend yourself to get acceptance. You no longer sacrifice yourself to preserve the integrity of others. You no longer confuse manipulation for compassion or attachment for love. You've left behind the outdated guidelines, indoctrination, and restraints that held you caught in a never-ending loop of people-pleasing. And now, you move differently now. Indeed, it makes people uneasy. Indeed, some people will describe you as challenging. Indeed, some will go. However, it is not a loss if they are absent. It's a purification, because you will never be asked to shrink by those who really love, respect, and admire you. Thus, make room, be honest without fear, and live without regret. This isn't only a fresh mindset. You've been reborn. There's only one more thing to do now that you've taken control. Never turn around. You already know what to do if this message resonated with you, and you felt every word in your heart. Similar to this video, please leave a comment below and forward this to someone who should hear it. Inform them that their liberation is on the horizon. And if you're on this road of personal emancipation, of stepping into your power, of refusing to shrink for anybody ever again, this is just the beginning. So subscribe to the channel immediately. You don't want to miss it because there is more truth, more power, and more unreserved realness on the horizon. Activate your alerts. Keep in touch and